Good morning, friends. Welcome back to As a Man Thinketh on Yanasa TV. So there is a very large oil spill in North Dakota right now. This happened along one of the Hess pipelines. It's 840,000 gallons of oil and brine. That's not the largest in U.S. history, but it is definitely pretty big. In terms of capacity and size, it's about the size of the Tioga oil spill that happened in 2013. The difference is that this particular spill is oil and brine. Brine is basically salt water as a byproduct of producing oil. Ironically, though, the soil contamination and groundwater risk from brine can be longer lived than that of oil. So this is actually a pretty big deal. So according to reports, this happened in a 6-inch flow line about 4 miles northwest of Stanley in Mountrail County in North Dakota. The fluid surfaced and then traveled about 250 yards across prime agricultural land before anybody really discovered what was going on. Many of you have noticed that we keep wearing these leather patch hats that say defend the right to farm on them. These leather patch hats support our nonprofit Meet My Neighbor Productions. You can get your hat at Yanasa Trading Co. and help us defend the right to farm through education, outreach, and, as we've been doing over the last couple of years, farm relief efforts. So get your leather patch hat and let others know that you defend the right to farm. Back on September 2nd, Hess had recognized that something was off with their numbers. They ran some tests, they came back negative, but they still searched along the line until they could find what happened. Fortunately, it got to this scale and size. I mean, you're talking from September 2nd until around the 12th or 13th when they finally recognized what was happening. Now, they're saying it's safe, but they really don't know the extent of this yet. And that's something that I wanted to bring attention to, because if you remember, in East Palestine, Ohio. Now, those were much more dangerous chemicals, and they infiltrated in different ways through burning in the air. It took somebody like J.D. Vance to go out there and show people when they were saying things were safe that no, it wasn't safe. And then you had all of these reports from ailments of people who lived in the area. It was a terrible situation. But, when authorities are reporting it's safe. They're basically what they're reporting on is what they've been able to test. But they actually don't even know the extent. They haven't even released the amount of acreage yet. They've just kind of described the fallout of 250 yards from the site. Is that in every direction? What does that actually look like as in terms of acreage? The other thing they don't know is, what's happened subsurface. And it's going to take them time in the remediation process to figure out what has happened in subsurface and how that is going to impact subsurface water. So you could test a well now, but in a month from now, some of this brine could start showing up in a well. I mean, this is not something that is set in stone, that there's nothing to worry about. I think it's funny that we're always told, hey, this happened, but don't worry about it. And then later on, it's like, oh yeah, well, that did happen. Sorry, we poisoned your cows. The danger of bracken brines is that they're extremely salty, okay? So they have a ton of sodium and chloride in them. And we're talking 20,000 barrels, 840,000 gallons of this stuff. Chloride is highly mobile. So any changes to groundwater, it can wash down pretty quickly. It can move rather quickly throughout the environment. So the spread of this is actually more dangerous in some ways than just oil, especially when it comes to the cleanup. They said that they estimated that they would be cleaning it up through mid-November, but that's based on what they can see on the surface. They don't really have a calculation yet of subsurface. And as the state said, that's actually a very optimistic outlook on this particular situation, because like I said, this isn't the largest incident on U.S. soil, but it is certainly a big one. Sodium, salt, it actually wrecks soil. If you look back in the Roman times, they would put salt on their enemy's land to destroy their soil. So the sodium in this mixture could have an impact on that farmland for years to come unless they do some really heavy remediation of this. Remediation of sodium usually includes stuff like calcium deposits, leaching the soil. So I'm curious to figure out, how much acreage is actually involved here. Now there's 1.7 million acres of farmland in this area. So, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it may not seem that big of a deal. Something to keep in mind is we're heading towards a period of time when we have freezing temperatures, which will impact their ability to clean that up. It could mean that some of this contamination remains in the ground until next spring, in which case you have heavy rainfalls, and that will spread the contamination even more.
Ancient eras and natural selection have refined and tailored pristine fibers with the resilience for today's days. Evolving beyond the last ice age, bison wool is nature's most dependable activewear. Buffalo Wool Company, 100% proven by nature, 100% American-made.
Check out the Buffalo Wool Company collection at yanasatradingco.com. As part of their cleanup process, they're going to install some groundwater screening points to understand where the movement of this is going as they work to get it cleaned up. But bottom line, this doesn't just impact the landowner where this occurred, but it can impact anybody where this contamination leaches out to over the next couple months, including wetland ecosystems. I mean, let's not forget those. If you go much further south from this location, you start getting into tribal lands. It's quite the big mess to clean up. I think another situation that we're going to run into here are contamination to livestock wells. Oftentimes those don't go as monitored as wells that people are drinking from. And if this enters into livestock wells, chloride and total dissolved solids could have a detrimental impact on those animals. But like I said, this isn't the largest that's ever happened. If you look at Blacktail Creek in 2015, that was 3 million gallons, more than 3 times what we're seeing right now in North Dakota. Of course, that was also North Dakota. The contamination lasted for years after the fact. They were still finding brine popping up in areas from that leak, which was brine and oil. It was similar to this, just about 3 times the amount. And I'm curious if we're going to find out, because those are preliminary estimates, 840,000 gallons, and it's just looking at the surface area. They're probably not 100% sure yet how big this actually is. The East Poplar oil field in Montana impacted 15 to 37 billion gallons of groundwater. I mean, this, I think, is kind of a serious concern considering the fact that we've had a groundwater shortage across the United States with all these data centers going in. The Kalamazoo River in Michigan, we're still, some people would argue we're still seeing the impacts of that one, and that happened in 2010. So anyway, this is a developing story. Like I said, I don't think they have all of the information yet. I mean, this is something that we're going to have to wait and see the full extent of this, the full extent of the acreage, how long it's going to take to clean up, whether or not the cleanup, which is more than likely the cleanup is going to continue into the winter months, what that means when we have the thaw and the melt of winter storms and further dispersal of things like chloride and sodium. So if you're in that area and you have a well, I would definitely be concerned and start monitoring your groundwater now. And I would monitor it every day before you give any of that to those animals, because the dispersal of this, there's all sorts of little estuaries under the ground where high concentrations can move in one direction, they may not move in all directions. The fact that they're saying this is safe is just, it's an answer based on what they know. They've also admitted we don't know the full extent of this yet. It's kind of like, yeah, sure, everything's fine, but we just don't know. We don't know a thing. I am just going to throw in here, though, that these pipeline bursts, they can be huge, right? And they can seem to have a massive impact. But when it comes to these resources that we all need, I mean, we can't operate our farms without oil and gas. Some would argue we could do it with electricity, but I would argue that's just as harmful. But it's a trade-off. We have to have these products. Piping them under the ground is still actually the safest. I mean, you hear about accidents that happen from piping things under the ground, but the actual ratio of accidents and spills to pipes versus above ground transportation, trains. I mean, we had a lot of train wrecks a couple of years ago. It's unusual. Truck accidents, boating accidents, those are actually much higher, and they happen more often than having something like a pipeline crack or burst or leak. So it is still the safest form of transportation, but it is shocking when we see these types of things happen. And those are kind of, part of the trade-offs for how we live our lives. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying that to everything there's a trade-off. But when it comes to safety and whether or not these pipelines are the safest option, they still actually are the safest option for transport of these fluids, of these, well, what could be dangerous to others. But it also explains why a lot of people don't want pipelines running across their farmland. Because when this happens, it doesn't just impact the farmers on that farm where the pipeline is running, but it impacts everybody around them. It's an interesting conundrum. It's the safest way to do it. Nobody wants it. Everybody has to have it. Anyway, guys, stay tuned for more stories like this here on Yanasa TV, where we try and keep you informed of what's going on in our agricultural communities. Every day, more and more Americans are waking up to the fact that our society is simply unhealthy. We've been being fed poisons and being told to put poisons on our body by corporate America for years. A lot of the things that we've been told were bad for us, like animal fats, are actually good for our bodies. Your skin is the largest organ of your body, which is why on Yanasa Trade & Co., we're pleased to offer you guys Bison tallow lotions and creams. These Bison tallow lotions and creams are amazing. They're not made by a big corporation. They're made by a homesteader just like you guys, our friends out of Canada, Dr. Nathaniel and Susan Ostashowski. We've visited numerous bison ranches and farms and parks across the entire continent of North America. And these are some really great people who have come up with some really great products, and you can buy them on Yanasa Trade & Co. and support this program and support your health all at the same time.